We're going into part 2 now. I just want to talk about John Paul's idea around freedom and his inclusion of freedom in his theology of the body. Now, I've had the argument that, firstly, producing porn is the creator's free choice. We live in a free world, and yes, okay, to an extent that is true. But John Paul II would add that the human person is created for freedom. But then what exactly is freedom? We hear that word bandied about, especially in South Africa. Now, you might say that pornography is helping people to feel good. It's paying people who need to work, and it's people want to be there, etc., etc. Well, John Paul II says, and I quote, "Human freedom belongs to us as creatures. It's a freedom which is given as a gift, one to be received like a seed and to be cultivated responsibly. Freedom then is rooted in the truth about man, and it is ultimately directed towards communion," unquote. Now, God designed us for authentic, honest love, where a person gives himself to the other completely, in total freedom. Okay? So the act of intercourse, let's just take that, says, "I give you all that I am." Now, John Paul takes us further and he says that our bodies speak a language, meaning that God gave us our bodies, He created us as male and female, to be used in a specific way. There's a reason we are created male and female. And if we train ourselves to use it differently to that purpose, we're setting ourselves up for a lot of pain and a failure on a number of fronts. You see, He's the author of that language. And I'm not going into gender ideologies and things here. That's for another day. So, contrary to what it promises, pornography doesn't enhance sex, nor does it help us to understand that our bodies speak a language of love and of self-sacrificial union, I suppose, as God intended. Pornography casts every participant in the selfish role of just taking, of using the body merely as a means to an addictive pleasure, leading most times to disappointment, to shame, to a hollow experience that can never fulfill and that can never affirm us in any good way, but the opposite. You see, pornography obscures the language of the body. Now, John Paul II gives us a beautiful analysis of the 4 marks of God's love in the life of Christ, and His love for the church, also where it is repeated in the wedding vows, and the love of spouses, which for me are a game changer once meditated on. I just love this part of theology of the body. So the 4 marks of self-donating love, or agape love, are free, total, faithful, fruitful. And I'm going to give you a very quick explanation. Just look at the crucifix here. Okay, we see perfect love, where Jesus gives of Himself totally, freely, in freedom. It's His own choice, and He promises that it's for our own good, for salvation, and it's fruitful. It brings us new life. So what has this got to do with pornography? Okay, well, is porn for both the actor and the consumer, is it free? No, often it's not. It comes with a price, first of all, as in money, as well as the price of sickness, if it's, in a human contact. It's all consuming, especially time. Is that freedom? Is it total? Meaning, are both the actor and the viewer giving of themselves completely to the other? Is there a spiritual and an emotional and a life-giving bonding and the gift of self being given to the other? I don't think so. Is it faithful? I mean, can this ever be a thing in pornography? When you are succumbing to multiple sexual acts at each click of the button? Is it fruitful? Well, certainly. There's no life-giving fruits that can come from this activity. Full stop. So husbands and wives continually renew their wedding vows in many ways, but especially through the one flesh union, the marital act, the sexual union between a couple, where a couple receives the special graces. But moreover, listen to this, they become a symbol of the union of Christ with the church, as it says in Ephesians 5, which speaks of a deep change in their very being, not simply as passive recipients of God's grace. So all this leads John Paul to get us to think about the seriousness of marriage, which I think is worth mentioning here, since infidelity, as research shows, has become the number one cause of divorce today. And pornography is infidelity. There's just no two ways about it. John Paul says, and I quote, "Indeed, the very words, 'I take you as my wife' or my husband, refer not only to a determinate reality, but they can be fulfilled only by means of conjugal intercourse. This reality, the conjugal intercourse, has moreover been determined from the very beginning by the institution of the Creator," where he says in Genesis, "Therefore, a man leaves his father and his mother and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh." Unquote. So it goes without saying that pornography perverts this marital act, the conjugal union, because, it doesn't allow for the ethical and mutual self-donation of the couple, but rather it becomes more about, the techniques, the fetishes, the self-gratification that is experienced by the viewer or the consumer. And it completely obliterates the beautiful acts of self-giving. Now, in its truest form, the conjugal or the marital or the sexual act should always reflect the reciprocal acceptance of the other. It is an act of reciprocation of this love. John Paul II actually warns husbands and wives against perverting the conjugal act, the marital act, the sexual union, when he says, and I quote, "Remember that you may not treat that person as only the means to an end, as an instrument, but you must allow for the fact that he or she too has, or at least should have, distinct personal ends." Unquote. Now, I just want to quote to just end on another great verse that John Paul II fleshes out in Theology of the Body, which bears mentioning, I think, in this context of pornography. And here, Jesus is commenting on the sixth commandment in Matthew 27, verse 28, where he says, "You have heard that it was said that you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman or a man lustfully has already committed adultery with him or her in his heart." Unquote. Okay. Our Lord gets to the heart of the commandment here. And in doing so, he prohibits all forms of pornography today. The Catechism, and John Paul quotes this as well, it gives 3 reasons why this is so. And in number 2, 3, 5, 4. Number 1, he says that pornography offends against chastity because it perverts that conjugal act, that marital act, the intimate giving of spouses to each other. You see, God made us as sexual beings, and our sexuality is not personal or truly human unless it is used to foster a lifelong mutual bond between a man and a woman. Okay, number 2. Pornography perverts sexuality by ripping it away from the intimacy of partners to make sex an exhibition. I quote here. It does great injury to the dignity of its participants, the actors, the vendors, the public, since each one becomes an object of base pleasure and illicit profit for others, unquote. Like I said, we are creatures made in the image of God with an inherent dignity. And pornography, what it does, it expressly denies this because it turns people into products. And just to quote again, it immerses all who are involved in the illusion of a fantasy world, unquote. Pornography is known to be fantasy. Number 3, the porn industry uses this form of mass entertainment to sell us an illusion of meaning. We buy into this ridiculous notion that it is actually cool to masturbate alone to eroticized images of people who are only pretending to be like you. And that this lures you into their world. All right. So I hear you say that this is all pie in the sky. I mean, how do I integrate this authentic love, this radical holiness, active life of service and evangelization into my messed up, broken and sinful life? So I believe, and I firmly, and I can attest to this, and there are many people out there who can attest to this, that the theology of the body gives us a new lens through which we can view ourselves, our world, and our destiny with God one day. Purity is possible, but we must struggle to love with truth and integrity, and that is a struggle today. The path to happiness and to holiness in life is to learn to speak the language of the body as God intended, freely, totally, faithfully, and fruitfully. And there's so much more on this. So to conclude, let's just bring all this in line with life and with science. Okay, I know you all like to have some scientific kind of stuff behind all this, and it's all in parallel with our faith. Research has continually proved that pornography has concrete negative effects on the body. Impact on the brain, it impacts the mind and the psyche and everything about the human person. And if we want to learn to train our eyes to see people, persons authentically, we have to say no to porn. That's the bottom line. I want to just quote again here. There is no dignity when the human dimension is eliminated from the person. In short, the problem with pornography is not that it shows too much of the body, but that it shows too little of the human person, unquote. Thank you. I just at this point would like to ask you to go and visit the Theology of the Body website, tobsa.co.za. There is also this Talk About Porn website, talkaboutpornography.co.za. Please visit it and you'll get lots of resources.
Enhlizweni